This is ACOFAE.
Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Collection of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content, and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode does not contain spoilers, but does mention Fallen Gods, Twilight, and the MCU. We appreciate your patience as we navigate through some technical difficulties near the end of this episode.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to ACOFAE, your weekly deep dive into the fantasy, literature, and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are welcoming a very special guest and our new friend, Rachel Van Dyken,
who is author of the recently released Fallen Gods, Book 1 of the confirmed duology, and also a New York Times #1 bestselling author. Welcome, Rachel.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about Fallen Gods and all the other things.
And we are super excited to have you here. We are, of course, talking about Rachel's new release, Fallen Gods, but we are also talking about so much more. We are very excited and have done just the tiniest bit of research. So, Rachel, your website, fantastic. The thing on your website that really struck me was that you do not pigeonhole yourself. You say, don't put me in a genre. I write everything. I read everything. I write everything. You read everything. And that not limiting yourself is something that we really, really relate to here at ACOFAE.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that I'm a reader first. I'm an author second. And that's how I started in being an author is I was a reader, an avid reader. I'm talking I was really deep into anxiety and depression and stuff. So I was reading 10 books a week, if not more. And also working in the mental health field with kids. So it was my own escape. And so now whenever it comes to writing, I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. I should write vampires, or I should write this next, or do this. So the way that I write is the way that I read. I write what I like to read. And that's kind of not the best business advice I could give anyone, because it definitely makes it hard promotion wise, because I can be sitting here talking about, a romantasy that I'm writing and also be talking about a mafia that I wrote a year ago or a rom-com I wrote before that. So I'm kind of all over the place, but that's how I read too. I read everything. So it kind of works out for me.
But that also shows having that diverse background with all of the different things that you've read also contributed to your writing style. And you can oh, you know what? Maybe I can integrate part of this into another one. I mean, you kind of did that with Fallen Gods too, because we have the mafia concept with Fallen Gods.
Absolutely. It made it easier because for me, I was trying to write a really good romantasy and had a couple different drafts written for Fallen Gods. And with that was wow, what kind of jobs would they have in urban fantasy? What would make the most sense? And in my mind, it completely went to well, vampires are rich because they're old. So gods would be rich, but they're only here for a certain amount of time because they'd probably go into crime or something that makes sense. So in my mind, I'm oh, they'd definitely be mafia. So my mind was totally 2 + 2 = 4. This makes total sense. They'd be mob bosses. So and then I was able to pull from that actual mafia background I have of having a huge mafia series. So yeah, it just made total sense for me. And it did end up working for Fallen Gods beautifully.
And of course, all different genres, all different things. We explore everything that brings us joy. That is something that we really stand behind here at ACOFAE. And it is so exciting to dive into this book. And I know that this story, because there is a really wonderful author's note that you have here talking about your grandfather. This story came from somewhere very personal, and I would like to get into that. I'd like to get into your writing style as well. However, I did a little bit of research, and I saw an interview from 2014 where you were saying that your writing process is this is your job. You sit down and you crank out 7 to 12 hours a day, this, and your husband is working too. This is kind of how you kind of treat it. I am curious how that process has changed with the evolution of time and the addition of family as well.
Yeah, I want to punch that person in the face right now so desperately. That was back when I had all the time in the world. Like, and I'm like, the audacity that I would even say that. I can't, because now I have 2 kids.
Like the internet is forever.
Yeah, like going to the bathroom by yourself is like a prize, right? Like it's like the joy of the world. Like when I can actually go to the bathroom without getting interrupted is amazing. So now I'm like, I can't imagine physically sitting down and writing that many words a day. If I didn't have kids, I would definitely be keeping that same schedule because it worked for me very well, but I've definitely had to adapt. I'm having 2 kids now. I don't do well with interruptions. Like I'm very ADHD, so I have to write with the lights off. I have to have certain music on. I am very much like I have to have a certain like array of things like when I'm writing. So if someone comes and like taps me on the shoulder or they interrupt me, I want to kill them first off. And then I have like rage. So, now I've really had to taper off like my emotions a little bit when it comes to writing and stuff, because I do get interrupted constantly. I do still have that same writing process where I'll write big chunks. I'll write as much as I possibly can. And then, I have to shut down, take care of the family. Apparently kids need to get fed. It's weird. I don't know, and get put to bed, and you have to like adult and, do normal things. So I end up making time for that. But yeah, my writing process has definitely shifted since 2014. Oh gosh. Yeah, it's definitely shifted since then.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. So for your writing process for Fallen Gods, we learn that you have a Norwegian heritage, yes, and your grandfather was very influential in telling you stories. Would you like to expand on that a little bit and share a little bit of him with us?
Yeah, so my grandpa, they came from Norway, and it was funny because during the writing process, I actually was able to see like them coming like into the States and like how they changed their name from Gangstel to Jacobson because they couldn't pronounce their name, so they had to change it and do all these different things. And so like within the book, like it was really fun to be able to actually use like that heritage that I actually have and write from a place where I can be like, hey, this is actually my family, like my heritage. Like I can actually write from a space where I'm using books and poems and texts that my grandparents gave me from Norway, which I was able to do, which was really cool. So it was a good way to honor my heritage, but also a good way just to be able to research stuff that I had from as a child growing up. Like I grew up with Norse mythology. And so I was even talking to my dad last night. And I was like, Dad, it's so weird. People don't know Norse mythology. Like even with what I put in Fallen Gods, which I thought was like maybe 1% out of the 100 I could have put in, and people were still like trying to follow it. I'm trying to figure out like how do they not know these things? And he's like, well, people don't grow up getting told those stories. Like they get told Greek mythology, Roman mythology. You learn the other mythologies. Norse is just not something people know, because for me, like even during edits, I was like, how does my editor not know who a giant is? Like it's a giant, and I would try to explain things and over explain them, and they just did not get it. And I couldn't fathom it because again, I grew up with it. So it just didn't make sense to me how you couldn't know all the different stories of Thor and Loki and the trials and like how the dwarves made the hammer. Like it just didn't make any sense to me. So so it was really cool having those stories growing up and be able to use them finally in a book format.
Well, and I think like to what you said, I mean, and we learn in the characters in the book too, you embedding Norse mythology in Fallen Gods is refreshing and like a public capacity, because I feel like what people do know is from comics and MCU, and that's only a portion of it. When you're like, I mean, you're probably you've seen those movies and you're like, well, that's not exactly accurate. And this is, you were like, can I be the fact checker for this kind of thing?
No, it totally was. And like the biggest fear was getting compared to that because that's all people know. So like on one end, you're like, oh, that's great because that's a good universe that people could compare you to. That makes a lot of money, that universe. But that's not a bad comparison, but it really is in the end, because if they're not doing it correctly, then I'm the one that looks like they're wrong. You know what I mean? When I'm like, no, listen, this is how it's supposed to be. So yeah, it definitely had that same reaction with it.
I'm the right one.
Exactly. Dang it. Like I did all the research. No. Yeah. I mean, even down to like how Odin's married to Freya, I'm like, well, actually, so like, coming into that and trying to change all those things, they were using stuff that was familiar to people. They basically took all the parts they knew people would at least know a little bit, and they put it in the MCU, which is fine. That's what you do for a, blockbuster movie. You don't want to educate people on like this huge, long story arc. You're trying to get everything fit in. So it does make sense. With the book, I was able to fit some stuff in and explain things. And in book 2, I really get to explain a lot of stuff and just like unload. I get to unleash the Kraken, guys. Like I get to go crazy. It'll be great.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but your first draft of this was reading more like a textbook. Is that correct? It was just like chock
Yes.
full of everything that you love.
Yeah. They were like, nobody's gonna read this. Like my first draft, I love it. So I was actually again talking to my dad about this last night. I'm like, I feel like I wrote the first version of this book for every nerd out there, and all of us nerds would have been like, this is the masterpiece. It's the best book ever written. But then no one else would have purchased it. They would have just been so overwhelmed. And so like even my editor was like, the amount of times they had to like put the book down and look things up was like every page. And in my mind, I'm like, that's cool. Like you're learning something, but that's not mainstream. That's not what's going to sell a book. I'm a nerd. I love research, and I wanted so desperately to do it correctly that I think I overcorrected a bit. So having to come in and edit some of that stuff out was so extremely painful for me, because I was like, no, but you need this because of all these other reasons. They're like, no, actually we don't need any of that because nobody cares. So we're going to take that out. So yeah, it was painful. It was so painful, but I'm glad that we came up with the draft that finally made it into the book. It's really good, and it's solid, and it's entertaining. And I know they were right. I know my publisher was correct. It was just painful at the time.
Do you think this process, compared to your other genres that you've written, was it more tedious because of the research component? Because like you said, you have your paranormal, you have your mafia, there's always these other research components. But because this one was so close to your heart, where you're like, and it has to be like, let me get everybody else as passionate about this Norse mythology as I am.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, is you want them to love it as much as you do. And then also there's not a lot of books in this genre, so like of Norse mythology. So like you're the person that's kind of coming out being like, I guess this is a new way we can write books now, guys, like have fun. And so you never want to be the first person, right? And I feel like I kind of was. And so I'm like, I don't want to be the blueprint for that either, because then oftentimes what authors do is if they're baby authors or they're new, they take the books that they've read in those genres and then they go, okay, now I'm going to mash up and do my own thing. And I want to be like, no, like do your own thing, because what I did is not the perfect mashup of it. Like there's so many more books you should read and like research and do. So obviously don't just take my word for it, like do your own research. But I think on top of that too, the hard part about this one is I'm a hybrid author, so I do indie and I do traditional. So I've always been with both traditional, like in stores, and also my own thing. And I had taken time off traditionally publishing for about 3-ish years, I want to say. So like my last book was The Godparent Trap with Grand Central, and that was a rom-com, like women's fiction rom-com, like 3 or 4 years ago. And I had taken time off. And you forget that the audience is so different for stores. So like the audience is so different, and it's something that as an author you have to take into account. I wish it wasn't the case, but you really do. So not only did I have the challenge of like the Norse mythology, staying true to it, being the blueprint for it a little bit, but then also being like, okay, the readership is totally different. And also post-COVID, they don't know me. Like there's a whole new, like tons of new podcasts, tons of new bloggers, tons of new book talkers, Instagram book talkers. Like there's so many people out there that have no idea that I'm an author. They've never read any of my stuff. And this is going to be their first introduction into me and my backlist. So there's a lot of pressure there to perform and do well, because people during COVID, what did they do? They started reading again, but a lot of them just started reading what they saw that was presently in front of them, which wasn't my books. So I feel like I had to like pick up and be like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I do. Hopefully I make a good impression, but also there's 170 other books you can grab on my backlist. Have fun. So like that was in the back of my head too at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was kind of like that constant pressure too was definitely affecting the writing as well.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that little behind the scenes. Obviously, I could never be an author. I do not have the talent. It seems that the pressure and expectation is always kind of shifting and evolving and changing as things kind of go. And it was really wonderful and refreshing, as you say, to read your book, Fallen Gods, with Norse mythology, because it is not... It's a little, there's a spin here. It's not like, as we know it. It is new and exciting. So, could you kind of take us through your process of spinning this on its head a little bit? And I saw a tagline that compared this, and we don't like the comparisons here at ACOFAE, but this one really just stuck into my mind. It was Thor meets Twilight. And I went, okay. All right. So, can you kind of like take us through some of these characters, our setting, and did this story like speak to you? Did we know we were going to college right from the beginning?
So right from the beginning, I wanted a college setting because I do really great new adult. Like I was kind of like, what can I lean into that I do well? And I'm like, I know my voice is younger, so I do more like upper YA new adult. I know that's what I'm known for. And I'm like, I can lean into that. I know I write sometimes darker because of the mafia, but I tend to have like very much like I love secondary characters. I love dialogue. I love tons of fast paced dialogue. So I was like, perfect. College is great because if you put me in any other setting, I think my voice almost sounds too young. People think the characters are too immature. And I'm like, that's fair. That's totally fair. So I wanted the college setting. It made sense to me. So basically I had put gods and giants, sworn enemies in a university in a town, Lake Stevens, that actually exists, where my grandparents used to have a lake house there. So it made sense again to have it in this area. And so I was trying to think of like a way that I could bring in like Norway without going to Norway. And if you've ever been to Seattle, it's very misty, very beautiful. You have this giant city with all these trees everywhere. And I was like, that would be a great setting. I know the location. I can talk about it well. And so I was like, let's just make up a brand new university and nestle it right there at Lake Stevens, which has its own kind of folklore around it. It's right north of Seattle. So I placed them there, and then I wanted to turn it on its head. I didn't want Thor to be the hero. I wanted Loki to be in it. I wanted, gods and giants to be in it. But I was like, how do we make it to where the gods are bad? Because honestly, in most mythologies you look at, the gods are very selfish. They're very arrogant. They're not necessarily good. And then when you do kind of make them good, they're still kind of like anti-heroes. And in Norse mythology, they really worship like Odin as Odin father, like all knowing, all seeing, all wise. Even in the MCU, they do the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, Odin wasn't the greatest. Like they do still see him that way in Norse mythology, but he was very selfish. Like he took out his own eye in order to see his own future because he so desperately wanted to have wisdom. So like in the mythology, and I was like, someone who would be willing to do that is so worried about their future. That means they're selfish. They're a narcissist. I'm like going off in my head about like the type of person he would be. And I'm like, yeah, he would not be a good guy. And so I wanted to turn it on its ear. So in Norse mythology, if you're not familiar, the giants from Jotunheim are the only realm out of the 9 realms that exist like in Asgard, or they exist outside of Asgard. They're the only ones that are powerful enough to take over Asgard. So they're basically like Odin's nemesis. He hates the giants. And then if you're really familiar with like Greek mythology and the Titans, how like Zeus tried to like kill his own father, take over the Titans. Similar backdrop with the giants. We have like the giants are the old gods. And like Loki and Thor and Odin to be like the newer gods, and they basically kill Ymir, which would be the giants, and all the brothers, and they use them to create the earth. So you have like that same kind of like big origin story, I guess you could say. So you have like this tension between the giants and Odin, because they're like old gods, new gods. I want to kill you, but we both want ultimate power, which is the weapon, which is Mjölnir, which is the hammer, which is Thor's hammer. So the whole concept is she is Odin's daughter, Rey. She's sent to university to do one thing, which is find the hammer that is now in the hands of the giants, which you don't know why yet, and bring it back to Odin. He has admitted that he's no longer worthy to hold the hammer, but because she is of Odin's descent, of his blood, she can wield it and take it back. And because it is the most powerful hammer in the world, and because it was lost during this huge war between the giants and the gods and why they're trapped here, it's the only thing that can restore the Bifrost, bring them back home, restore the gods' power, make everyone happy, boom. So that's kind of like the whole setup for the story. And it's her doing what she feels like is the best case scenario in a bad situation of what she can do in order to get home and to kind of make peace with kind of like the life that she has.
And Rey does not have an excellent home life because, no. Odin, not the best dad. Shocking. I know. Yeah. Not the best dad. However, eldest daughter pressure, there's a lot of pressure on Rey. She has been kind of living on eggshells with her dad, and then boom, she's 18, you have a mission, off you go. But also your stepmom and her safety depend on you. And also, our people are depending. I'm depending. Mm-hmm. Don't you want to make me proud? Like, the daddy issues are strong here.
Yeah, super strong daddy issues, her wanting his approval, but then also at the same time, like feeling like, what else is my purpose other than to be this weapon? Like, she's known nothing else in her life. And so you kind of want to like be on her side, and you kind of understand like why she's doing what she's doing. Her only purpose is to like succeed. And if she does that, then she's done well, and also like to protect those that she loves. And he is dangling like her best friend Rowan, over her, and also like LaFoy, who is her stepmom, another giant. So you have all these people in her life that she's like, those are the only people that are my ride or dies and are next to me. And if I don't help save them, then what else do I have? Like, why am I even living? Why am I even here? And so in her mind too, she's like, God, Dad's bad anyways. Like, he's powerful anyways. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, she knows, and she's logical. She's not stupid. She's like, this is probably a bad idea, but really, what other option do I have? And then the whole entire time, she's too trying to figure out like a way to wield it and a way to figure it out and fix it. But like, again, she's born in, I said air quotes here, born into this world. So she doesn't know what other options she actually has yet. And also she hates the Ericsons, which is the other family, the giant family. She hates Aric, who used to be her fiance. There was a betrothal, which will make sense when you read the book, but they were meant to make peace between the two families. And then he rejected her. She feels like he rejected her when really he was trying to set her free. So there's bad blood there. She wants her revenge. She wants to come back looking all hot, being like, look what I stole from you. So, I mean, we have that kind of coming into play too.
So when you were kind of planning out this book, and we have Ray, we have Aric, we have these characters, who came to you first? Did Ray come to you first? Did Aric come? Was Odin kind of like everything came from him? Like, where was this structure from?
So actually Odin came first, which is weird because normally it's the main characters. Odin, I thought of first. I literally had a vision, and how I write was very cinematic. Like it's a movie in my head. I just press stop and play and let the characters do their own thing. And I just saw Odin in the back seat of this Mercedes, just like with his tatted hand on that raven, like walking stick or cane, and just sitting there like tapping it. And I kept hearing this tapping in my head, and I was like, oh, that would be really cool in a movie. And I was like, imagine like you're like panning in, it's like, inside the car, and like my brain was like coming up with him just sitting there, and then you kind of pan up and see like the beard with all like the different like trinkets and like the runes on his beard. And I'm like, that's badass. Like that would be a really cool movie. Just that would like make me watch a movie. I'd be like, we're here for this. We are here for Daddy Odin. So I was like, we're gonna do that. And then I kept thinking like older Jason Momoa as Odin, and I'm like, oh, that'd be so cool. So yeah, so again, my brain is like thinking of all these things, and I'm like, let's set the scene, shall we? And so literally wrote that first scene where he then tells her to go hunt, and then she says like Odin father, and I was like, mic drop. Like I just love that the opening first chapters I feel like really set the scene for the book, and they're definite like I'm like, if you don't like the first few chapters of this book, then I'm probably not the writer for you, because I feel like they're really, really strong. And I feel like they get you into the book and get you to go, okay, like, here we go. Like, let's go. Because it does start off fast, and it's a very fast paced book. The timeline is very short, but to make it any longer just felt very forced. And I was like, we're just going to, you know what? It's magic. Magic is what's happening right here. It's fine. We're going to make it work. So, yeah.
You describing it in cinema is exactly like you could see it.
Yeah.
Which is always fun, because and I'm sure you probably feel this way, where you're like, you could be reading something and you're like, there's no way that can get depicted any other way, but yes. I have it in my mind. And then you have this where I'm like, I'm imagining the tapping of the hand and like the slow zoom out in the back of the, like you can see it.
Yeah.
And now it's just like you have these wonderful ideas, and you're like, anybody?
Jessica, it now has to happen.
We have the material here.
You're on the same page as me. Like, I know it's like right there. Like, it has to happen. I gave them a perfect little plate of like feasting.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. There's also a love story here, and I love tropes. I love tropes, and we've got a lot of them here. We have forced proximity. We have enemies to lovers a bit. We have lots, and they're so much fun. And I think one of the most fun things about writing is that you can do whatever you would like. And there is a little bit of an adventure here as well, along with a love story, because we have to find things, and there are things that we are looking for. And there's a bit of a mystery. And I just love that, because not only do we get to explore the characters and their relationship with each other, but we get to explore the beautiful setting that you have created. We are off campus. We are in ice caves. We're in like this kind of bone area. We are in house parties. We are playing beer pong. Like it is just it's wonderful. The college setting, opens itself up to so many opportunities. And Jessica and I were talking, and this sounds like a very fun college to attend. I would like to do the hunt. I would like to go under the arch and hold the candle.
Right?
I think it would be a lot of fun. So when you were kind of mapping this out and you were like, well, they're going to go to this party and they're going to play this game, and there's going to be a wild hunt, and we're going to have these opening ceremonies where you're just like, yeah, you know what? This is fun. I like this.
No, totally. I just thought, I kept thinking about like my orientation at college and then what orientations would look like if you had a little bit of like a pagan rituals with it. And like, what would that look like? Because everything has meaning. And then my agent and I, when we were going through edits and stuff, she was like, she thought it was cool because we were like, instead of pledging Greek, you're pledging Norse, right? Because the runes are on each of the dorms. So like, it was just like a really cool, to me, I'm like, yeah, we need shirts now. We need to all pledge. We're going to pledge these dorms. We have to do this now. So it just seemed like a fun idea. And then to have, obviously campuses have a lot of old stories. And like, there's always like, I know my old college campus had like, they had all these like, don't go into that building and don't do this. So bringing that in was so easy. It just made it really easy and it wasn't forced. And I hate books that they have to like, it seems like, okay, well, that was too coincidental, or they force things on you. And then you're just like, and for this, it was like, it would make sense they would have a really old building that is an old church. It would make sense they would have all these different areas they would escape to, or even like the graveyard. And so it made it a lot easy to add in that story. And I really wanted it to be something to where, again, I'm always thinking TV, movie-wise. I'm like, that'd be a really easy transition and something really fun visually to watch too. Because again, I'm very visual. And so for me, like I'm writing it as if I'm seeing it on TV and I'm like, oh, that's really pretty. That's really cool. That would be a really cool concept. And I hope that the way I write, people also see it that way. So it just makes it more fun, I think, for everyone,
With all of these levels, I don't want to say levels, but all of these additions with the plot, and your writing style and it being visual, would you say that you have both the pantser and plotter writer in you because you have some of those core concepts there?
Normally I'd say I'm a total pantser, but with this, I had to be a lot more of a plotter. With this one, I had scenes. The best way to describe it is I had scenes that I knew that were huge scenes that I really needed to keep in, that I loved. And then I had a lot of things I had to connect. So like my agent was like, you need to make sure that like, they're still going to class. And I'm like, yeah, but class is boring. We don't want to go to class. But she was like, no, we need to do stuff like that.
Nobody wanted to hear about them being in
Nobody
class.
wants to go to class.
No one cares. I'm like, I don't care about the professor. Why do I have to name him? Like, all that stuff was so boring to me, but I had to come in and bring in that stuff because that's the normal thing you would have at a university. It did ground me a bit. It slowed me down. Weirdly enough, even though the book is not slow, it did slow me down a little bit, and to add in those things. And I did have to plan a lot of those things in there to make things make sense. For me, I always call it like the big dots versus the small dots. I have all the big dots and I know what's going to happen there and I love them, but I need the tiny little dots that connect the big dots. Otherwise, the string just completely gets lost and then we don't have a book anymore.
Oh, that's such an interesting way to put that. That is visual. I love it. I love it. I'm a visual person as well. That's absolutely fantastic. That's perfect. I love that. Okay. My question for you is this rune system. Is that something that like you on a personal level, like, are you familiar? I caught the, normal people only get 24, there's 26 of them. I caught that. So where did that rune system come from? I love it so much.
I love the runes. I love that there's that's part of the magic system. Again, I wanted it to make sense. I wanted it to still be rooted in Norse mythology. And a lot of times, when you see stuff like this, they talk about the power. You hear about Thor's hammer, but you don't hear about the runes that maybe created the hammer. You don't hear about the stuff from the dwarves and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted there to be power in that. And it also plays into, and Freya doesn't obviously have a part in this very first book, but Freya was a witch. She was a goddess. And so she dealt with all the runes and all that kind of stuff. And so it was something that in Norse mythology I wanted to really bring in. It's also a huge superstition, and I needed to have another superstitious kind of thing that's also tangible. So maybe someone who isn't a god or a giant sees runes and they can say them out loud and something would happen. You know what I mean? You need to have another aspect in there to give people power, and give people another responsibility. And so I wanted to make sure that I left that open for it, just because again, it's really fascinating and they do mean something. My husband has several rune tattoos on his fingers, and they look really cool. And just the concept of having those just seemed like a really cool idea. So yeah.
It is very cool. You are correct. It is very cool.
Thank you.
Here I am. Like, I was with my niece last weekend and I was just like writing letters on my fingers. I was like, that's nowhere near as cool as a Norse rune. I'll be like, see, these are my tattoos.
Look up the runes and put them like right there.
Yes.
So take us through this love story a little bit. I just love it. Because we have the mafia kind of tie in our warring families, but we also have, Ray's, like, the feeling of rejection that she deals with this whole time. And she's seeing Aric again. And we have a little bit of push and pull here. And then we have something that I really love about Ray is she's got friends. Like, Ray has friends, and like, female friendships are something that are very important here on ACOFAE, and Ray has them. And they tell her, like, what are you doing, actually? Like, get away from him. Like, you don't want any of that. And that is something that I really appreciate in your writing, something I really appreciate in real life. So can you take us through this, enemies to lovers a little bit with our girlfriends kind of warning Ray?
Yeah, so it's any typical like college campus. Like, you're meeting all these random people, and she meets one of her friends like the very first day, and she meets another girl that she's like, okay, this girl's kind of crazy, but it's fine. And we even have like a funny intro and orientation where everyone's introducing themselves, and you're just like, like the typical. I keep thinking of it like the Pitch Perfect, where you're like seeing all the different characters come through, and you're like, okay, you meet all them, and then you meet like again the friends, you meet Reeves, you meet like all the different people that are going to be like the main players, the main characters. I do not like toxic friendships. I do not like mean girls. I don't like when books have them. I don't like it when my shows have them. I'm like, please don't do that trope, because like we all see it. Like, I just hate it so much. And so I wanted her to have funny friends that were actually supportive. Doesn't mean that they don't have their own backstory. Doesn't mean they have their own agenda. They can have their own agenda. They can have their own arc. I just don't want them to be unnecessarily mean. We have that enough in real life. And so I wanted it to be to where they were supportive and funny and good secondary characters, which I feel like I did really good. And then the love story is the same. She has enemies, and, Aric is not someone that she likes, genuinely just tolerates, and is kind of like, well, if I kill him, I kill him. I guess that's, whoops, we get the hammer anyways. So it's kind of her attitude towards him. So that push-pull, that constant dynamic between I love you, I hate you is constantly there. That line is very thin. He's constantly taunting her. He's obviously very attractive, and she is too. And so like in the book, you have that kind of like hormonal, like we're both in college kind of thing going on, but also you have like this constant like danger lurking in the background, and his need to constantly not even really protect her, but protect himself, and in protecting himself, protect her too. They very much have like their enemies to lovers, but also like she doesn't need a hero, and he doesn't want one, and she doesn't want one either. Like they're kind of at that same, like, we are of equal power, and we'll save ourselves basically. And then you can be right next. You can high five me when we're done. That's kind of like their relationship, which I love again too. I don't like the girl discovering she finally has powers, and then like, oh, the guy's gonna come save me. And I don't like any of those tropes. I'm tired of them. I want her to be powerful, but not so powerful that he's weak. And I want him to be powerful in his own right too. And they each have their moment, and we're good. And I feel like that dynamic is pushed through the entire story, and they bounce off each other really well when it comes to that love story and that dynamic. It doesn't feel like one steals it from the other. They both have, very good growth, and they both have that attraction for each other, but it's like separate and together. And I think that in an urban fantasy is really attractive for me, at least as a reader. It's really attractive to have that.
Well, I also think like the friends encourage it also, with the minimal knowledge that they have, but with the friendships, they're always when you're with your friends, you're always looking out for your best interests.
Yeah.
So even when things, I'm trying to think of how to reword this without spoiling anything. There were times in the books where it could have been perceived that things were getting physical, and all the friends involved would be like, look, at the end of the day, protect your heart, protect your heart, do all the physical things. And everybody, and again, we're like, it's not like that, especially initially. But it is college. And, and at the same time, Ray is having these, she's learning what it's like to have friends, because she has a talent that allows people to kind of just be enamored with her right off the bat. So she's like, is that something, are these people really my friends? And when she realizes that there are people who care about her, I think you portray that so wonderfully in your writing, because you're just like, wait, she's like, I get to have friends too. This is fun, because she's had to be on guard the whole time.
Yeah, she all of a sudden is like, wait a second, like I can enjoy it. Like she wants to actually do the boring things that she's making fun of and mocking, because she's like, oh, I have a life and I have friends finally. Like people see me for who I am. And then that's where the guilt comes in, right? With everything, because she's like, oh no, I'm going to wreck everyone's lives. And yeah, I think it's important to note on that, because that's so important that she all of a sudden becomes like a person and not a tool. And that changes things, changes her perception of everything.
Perception. I love it. I love it so much. A lot of this book is Ray's changing kind of views on everything that's going on. Like, are we actually the villains? Are they the villains? Is everybody the villain? Like, what actually happened? And there is kind of a through story through here that I just absolutely loved. And we get it from both sides or both families. And I loved it. And that is Thor's love story, which is not something that I was like very familiar with. And I kind of was like, I'm going to make a note of that, and I'm going to go Google that later. But that addition of Thor and our ring and his love, that was so surprising and so wonderful, and is Ray's favorite love story. And she says as much, and we get the, well, actually kind of side of that, and, two different sides. And I really just loved that kind of reminder that like every story has two sides, the winners, right?
Yeah.
All of that. But can you expand a little bit on the inclusion of Thor's story here?
Yeah. So there's kind of like a double, like kind of like a secondary love story, in that there's like this past where Thor had a ring that kind of helped temper his powers with Mjölnir with his hammer. So the dwarves were like, he can't control his powers, which you kind of see in the MC universe a little bit, but the hammer was given to him as a tool, right? And so the same thing with this ring, it was like the counteracting his powers, help him control it. And in order to help basically give power to the giants, they were like, we'll give you this half the power, which means that they will give the giants an engagement ring. He would fall in love with this girl, they would get married, and then the giants would share the power of Mjölnir, and they would both have like the same, they would be equal, right? It was kind of like, and that's kind of where the secondary betrothal comes in, in modern times with Aric and with Ray, where you're like, okay, history's repeating itself, the giants and the gods are going to make another truce, they don't have the same ring, but it's like the whole concept is there. And so like you have that whole concept of Thor falling in love, and just like his backstory about this other giant, but then there's a falling out, like something happens and no one knows what happened in their story. Like no one knows the true story of what happened. So in her story, you're still trying to figure out like the past, and she sees like paintings depicting this great love Thor had and all these different things, but you're seeing that like her view of history is so tarnished from reality that she's only been told little bits and pieces and has been forced to put things together. And Eric's only been told little bits and pieces. So it's not even that the giants have the right story and the gods don't. It's that they both have only been told enough to benefit their sides. So you don't know the full mapping of everything.
Which isn't that what history is? You're learning like history is told by the victors. Yeah.
You're never really going to have a full, it's air. There's going to be air in humanity and human ways of even writing down a story, let alone like depending on what side you're on. So it definitely follows that a little bit.
Knowing the process of writing this, we also know through your publicist, there were some shifts with the writing process from your initial release date to the final release date, which is out now in December. What was that process as a writer, knowing that you've done both indie and traditional? Was it something that you were accustomed to? Was it something that the product had already left your hands and then you were kind of like sitting there? Because I know with filmmakers, for example, they'll keep their product, and a lot of authors too, until that final deadline. But you submitted all of that. Like, how was that a learning for you?
That was definitely not the process I'm used to. This was completely different than any other writing process I've ever used with any publisher I've worked with, and I've worked with several. So it was definitely different. I did finish the book and turn it in, and then I waited for edits. And then it was kind of the end. To be fair, my book was supposed to come right after Rebecca's. I think they signed me, Rebecca. And so then it kind of caused everyone to kind of be paused on the imprint a little bit. And what they originally asked for was Norse mythology meets 365. And I gave that. But in giving that, it was a little bit not, by the time it was time for the book to come out, that no longer was a book that would have done well. Does that make sense? Like it would not have fit. So I edited that. We did go through edits on that, and we went and changed a whole bunch of stuff. And I say we like edited it out even then, still very intense as far as like really a ton of information, info dump, on top of it being very, very sexy, like very dark, like very, very dark, very to the point of like to where there'd have been so many triggers in it for like violence and just not great. So with all that being said, like I'm glad that happened though, just because I think had we released that book, I think a couple years ago it would have done really well. I think this day right now for this time, it would have been way too much, way too dark, way too all the things. I just don't think it would have done great.
Which goes back to what you were saying earlier about like how audiences shift. I mean, look at the 5-6 years since like you had everything changes. I mean, you've had things get spicier and less spicy and purity, like everybody's kind of like, and it's happening faster and faster, especially with the conversations with socials.
You can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time. We very much appreciate it on this Sunday.
Of course.
You've dropped a little bit about book 2, and we know that you have another release in another genre coming out. So what can you tell us about book 2, about your new release, and then wrapping with where everyone can find you, socials, and any live events, anything you would like to say?
So book number 2 comes out hopefully at the end of this year, Fallen Gods 2. I don't think I've even announced the title yet, so I might have to wait on that. I mean, I don't even know how it's going to even just 2 books. It's going to be a fat book, very fat. So we'll look forward to that. Very excited about that. I have another Mafia book coming out in February called Sweet Poison. It did 2 spinoffs, and this is like the 3rd spinoff I've done that with it, that finally ending everything. And as far as travel, like I will be running around the rest of the year. I haven't put everything on my website yet, but we'll be putting my travel dates and my and all my signings and everything on my Instagram, which is @RachVD. A couple other really fun news for like movie, TV series stuff that I'll be announcing hopefully this week too. So definitely stay tuned.
Please make sure you're following Rachel on all of her socials. We'll make sure those are in the show notes. And as always, please feel free to follow us. We're at ACOFAE Podcast on Instagram, and we're both on TikTok, ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica. Please feel free to rate us 5 stars on any of your listening platforms. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.